The road stretched endlessly ahead as former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson drove into a quiet town. The night air was crisp, and the glow of streetlights flickered over his black SUV. He wasn't looking for trouble, just a warm meal at a small-town diner. Parking near the entrance, he stepped out, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans. He looked like any other traveler, but his name carried a weight no one could ignore. A group of bikers sat outside the diner, their loud voices filling the air. Their leader, a burly man named Jax, leaned against his motorcycle, laughing with his crew. They were the type who thrived on intimidation, making sure everyone around them knew who ruled the streets. When Jax noticed Mike stepping out of his SUV, a smug grin spread across his face. "Well, well, look what we got here," Jax muttered, nudging the guy next to him. The gang turned, their eyes locking onto Tyson like wolves spotting prey. Mike didn't react. He wasn't here for trouble, he just wanted to eat. But Jax wasn't about to let him walk by so easily. "Looks like someone thinks he's too good for a bike," Jax called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. His voice dripped with mockery as his crew snickered. Tyson kept walking, ignoring the taunts, but he could feel their eyes burning into his back. The laughter faded, replaced by a tense silence. Jax's smirk twisted into something darker. Inside the diner, the warm scent of grilled food filled the air. Mike took a seat by the window, ordering a burger and glancing outside. The bikers hadn't moved, their eyes locked onto his car. He recognized that look, the kind that meant trouble was brewing. Jax leaned closer to his crew. "We can't have some outsider rolling in like he owns the place." His men nodded, their moods shifting from amusement to something more sinister. One of them, a wiry guy with slicked back hair named Snake, cracked his knuckles. "Let's show him some respect," he sneered. Jax smirked. "Yeah, let's." Outside, the gang's laughter grew louder. Tyson remained calm, but he had been in situations like this before. Trouble was coming. And it was coming fast. Mike Tyson calmly took a bite of his burger, chewing slowly as he stared out the window. He had been in fights his whole life, some in the ring, others in the real world. This situation? It felt familiar. He could sense the growing tension, the way those bikers carried themselves. They weren't just messing around. They wanted trouble. Outside, Jax and his crew leaned against their motorcycles, eyes fixed on the diner. Their laughter had died down, replaced with quiet whispers and knowing smirks. Jax ran a hand over his leather vest, turning to Snake. "Think he's scared?" Jax asked with a smirk. Snake chuckled, cracking his knuckles again. "If he ain't, he will be soon." Back inside, the waitress, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, walked over to Tyson's table. She glanced out the window, then back at him. "You should leave out the back," she murmured under her breath. "They don't take kindly to strangers." Tyson simply smiled and shook his head. "I'm just here to eat," she sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "Suit yourself." The bell above the diner door jingled. Jax and two of his men strutted inside, their boots clunking against the tiled floor. The other customers went silent, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The waitress stepped back, nervously clutching her notepad. Jax walked right up to Tyson's table and leaned in. "You're Mike Tyson, aren't you?" he asked, pretending to be impressed. Tyson took another bite of his burger, unfazed. "Yeah," Jax grinned. "Thought so. You know, we don't usually get celebrities around here." Snake pulled up a chair and sat down uninvited, arms crossed. "Yeah, real honor." His voice was thick with sarcasm. Tyson finally set his burger down and wiped his hands with a napkin. He wasn't in the mood for games. "You need something?" Jax's grin widened. "Just wanted to welcome you to town. Show a little hospitality." The tension in the room thickened. The other customers kept their heads down, pretending not to listen. The waitress took a step back toward the kitchen, just in case things got out of hand. Tyson leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Appreciate it," Jax chuckled. "Oh, we ain't done yet." Snake reached across the table and grabbed Tyson's drink, taking a slow sip before setting it back down. "Oops," he muttered, smirking. The entire diner held its breath. Tyson exhaled slowly, his patience wearing thin. He had no interest in a fight, but if they wanted one, they had no idea what they were getting into. Jax patted the table. "See you outside, champ." Then, with a smug laugh, he and his men turned and walked out. The moment the door swung shut, the tension in the diner eased, but it wasn't over. Tyson knew that much. He finished the last bite of his burger, pushed his plate away, and sighed. Outside, the bikers were waiting, and they had no idea what was coming. Tyson stepped outside, the cool night air hitting his face as he calmly adjusted his jacket. The parking lot was almost empty, except for the row of motorcycles and the group of bikers standing under the dim streetlights. Jax stood front and center, arms crossed, his smirk never fading. Snake cracked his knuckles, itching for action. The rest of the crew stood behind them, some leaning against their bikes, others watching with eager eyes. Tyson took a slow step forward. He wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him. Jax spread his arms. "Well, look who decided to join us." Tyson didn't respond. He just stared at them, calm as ever. Jax chuckled. "You know, for a big-time fighter, you sure don't look that tough up close." Snake sneered. "Yeah, maybe all that TV stuff is just an act." Tyson let out a small sigh. He had seen this 1,000 times before. Guys like this always thought they were in control until they weren't. Jax took a step closer. "See, the thing is, you're in our town now. And around here, we don't take kindly to outsiders thinking they're better than us." Tyson raised an eyebrow. "I was just eating my burger." Jax smirked. "Yeah, and now you're about to be eating something else." "Pavement." The bikers laughed, their voices echoing through the parking lot. Snake stepped forward, rolling his shoulders. "Why don't we make this fun? One round, champ. Just you and me." Tyson tilted his head. "You sure?" Snake scoffed. Scared, Tyson shook his head. "Nah, just asking if you're sure." Snake grinned and raised his fists, bouncing on his feet like a boxer. "Come on, champ. Show me what you got." The rest of the bikers hooted and hollered, hyping Snake up. They truly believed he had a chance. Tyson exhaled slowly, then took one step forward. Snake swung. He never saw what happened next. Tyson's fist connected with Snake's jaw in a blur so fast that the others barely registered the movement. A sickening crack filled the air, and Snake's body went limp before he even hit the ground. Silence. Jax's smirk vanished. His jaw clenched. "You think that was funny?" Tyson didn't answer. He simply looked down at Snake's motionless body, then back up at Jax. Another biker stepped forward, rage in his eyes. Before he could finish, Tyson moved. One punch to the ribs, another to the gut. The man doubled over, wheezing, before collapsing onto his knees. The remaining bikers hesitated. They weren't laughing anymore. Tyson cracked his neck, then looked directly at Jax. "Still want to do this?" Jax's confidence was gone. He glanced at Snake, then at his other man, both groaning in pain. His fingers twitched at his sides, but he didn't move forward. The air was thick with tension. Tyson sighed. "Didn't think so." He turned, walking back toward the diner. The bikers didn't stop him. They didn't say a word. As he reached the door, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. "Next time, pick your fights better." Then, with a calmness that made it all even more terrifying, he walked inside, leaving the so-called tough guys in a stunned, defeated silence. The air in the parking lot was thick with tension. Tyson stood, his feet planted firmly on the ground, staring at Jax and the remaining bikers. They had underestimated him, and now they were about to find out just how wrong they were. Jax clenched his fists, his face turning red. "You think you can walk away from this? You've messed with the wrong guys." Tyson's eyes locked on him, unflinching. "I'm not here to fight you," he said calmly. "But if you keep pushing, it won't end well for you." Jax snorted, stepping forward. "You really think you can scare us with that tough guy act?" Tyson didn't answer. He didn't need to. His fists had already done the talking. Jax took another step, clearly trying to provoke him. "You're just a big joke. Let's see what you've got." Without warning, Jax lunged forward, throwing a punch aimed at Tyson's face. Tyson dodged easily, his movement so quick it looked like he wasn't even trying. Jax stumbled past him, off balance. Tyson didn't wait for him to recover. In one smooth motion, he spun around and delivered a powerful punch to Jax's ribs. The sound of bone hitting flesh echoed through the night. Jax gasped, staggering backward, clutching his side. His face twisted in pain, but he didn't go down. He growled, wiping the blood from his lip, and turned back toward Tyson, furious. "You think you're the toughest guy here? I'll show you tough." But Tyson wasn't fazed. He stood his ground, waiting for the next move. Jax lunged again, this time throwing a wild punch with both fists. Tyson easily ducked under it and landed a solid right hook to Jax's jaw. Jax's body jerked, and he crashed to the ground, the force of the hit leaving him dazed and unable to stand. He blinked, trying to gather his senses, but it was clear he wasn't getting up anytime soon. The rest of the bikers stood frozen, watching in shock as their leader crumbled to the ground. Tyson took a step back, glancing at the others. His eyes were cold and steady, showing no sign of the fight. The remaining bikers exchanged nervous glances, their confidence quickly draining away. They'd all seen what Tyson could do now. One biker, a tall guy with a patch over his eye, took a cautious step forward. "You're crazy, man. We're not going to let this slide." Tyson's eyes narrowed as he turned toward him. "You sure you want to try it?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. The biker hesitated, glancing at his fallen comrades. He knew this fight wasn't one they were going to win. Without another word, the bikers began backing away, slowly at first, then faster as Tyson didn't move a muscle. Tyson stood still, watching them, his fists still clenched, but he made no move to stop them. He wasn't the one who needed to prove anything. Jax groaned on the ground, but he didn't try to get up. His body was too beaten, too broken to keep fighting. Tyson turned and walked back toward the diner, his head held high. The sound of the biker's retreating footsteps echoed behind him, but he didn't look back. When he stepped through the door, the waitress looked up in surprise. "Everything all right out there?" Tyson simply nodded. "Yeah. All good now." The bikers were no longer laughing. The mood had completely changed. Tyson stood tall, his face serious, his body calm but ready. The group of bikers now realized just how much trouble they had gotten themselves into. Jax, still holding his bruised side, struggled to his feet, wincing with every movement. His face was filled with both anger and fear. He wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his hand, glaring at Tyson. "You think you're some kind of tough guy?" Jax spat, struggling to catch his breath. "You've made a big mistake." Tyson didn't flinch. He simply looked at Jax with cold, calculating eyes, his stance unwavering. "No mistake here," he said quietly. "You all chose this." The tension in the air was thick. The other bikers seemed unsure of what to do next. They had witnessed their leader go down in just a few hits, and now they were hesitating. "You really want to test me?" Tyson asked, his voice calm but filled with power. Jax was trying to regain his confidence, but it was clear he was rattled. He wasn't the fighter Tyson was, not even close. His voice shook as he spoke. "Get him, guys. Take him down." The other bikers hesitated, but one of them, a tall guy with a grizzled face, finally took a step forward. His eyes were filled with determination, but there was doubt in his steps. He wasn't sure if they could beat Tyson, but he wasn't about to back down. Tyson watched him closely. He knew that look, the look of someone trying to bluff their way through a fight. But Tyson wasn't intimidated. Before the biker could make another move, Tyson was already on him. The biker swung his fist at Tyson's face, but Tyson ducked under it like he'd done 100 times before. With incredible speed, Tyson landed a hard jab to the biker's stomach, knocking the wind out of him. The man gasped for air, his body going limp as he stumbled backward. "Anyone else?" Tyson asked, his voice cold, his eyes scanning the group. The other bikers stepped back, clearly unsure about what to do. They had seen enough to know that they weren't going to win. Jax, still clutching his side, looked around at his crew, his expression full of frustration. "Forget it," Jax growled, barely able to stand. "We're done." The group of bikers, one by one, began to back away, their hands raised in surrender. Jax, now completely out of steam, turned and hobbled away from Tyson, still wincing with every step. Tyson stood there, unfazed, watching as the bikers disappeared into the distance. He wasn't someone who needed to prove anything. His actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. When they were gone, the quiet of the night returned. Tyson didn't move, but a slight smile played at the corner of his lips. As he turned to head back to the diner, the door opened and the waitress looked up with wide eyes. That was fast. Everything okay? Tyson simply nodded, a calm expression on his face. All good. Just another day. The bikers were now closing in on Tyson, their eyes filled with anger. Jax was getting closer, and Tyson could feel his heartbeat start to speed up. He knew something was coming, and it wasn't going to be good. One of the bikers, a tall guy with a scar across his cheek, gave a low growl. You think you can walk around here like you own the place? He sneered, taking a step forward. The other bikers circled Tyson, their hands on their weapons. Tyson didn't budge. He stood his ground, his eyes scanning the group, ready for anything. His fists were clenched, but his breathing was steady. He had fought plenty of times before, and he wasn't afraid now. You don't know who you're messing with, Jax spat, glaring at Tyson. We're not just any bikers. We don't take kindly to threats. Tyson's calm stare never wavered. I'm not here to fight, but if you want one, I'll give it to you, he said. His voice was low, but it carried with power. The bikers hesitated, clearly unsure of what to do next. Jax's confidence was starting to slip, and he was starting to realize that maybe they had underestimated Tyson. One of the bikers, a younger guy with a wild look in his eyes, took a step forward. He was eager to prove himself. I'll take him down, he said, cracking his knuckles. Tyson didn't flinch. He knew that look, the look of someone who was all talk and no action. Make your move, he said coolly. The young biker rushed forward, throwing a wild punch aimed straight at Tyson's face. But Tyson moved faster than anyone expected. With one swift motion, he ducked under the punch and landed a solid blow to the biker's stomach. The biker gasped, his body folding in half as he fell to the ground. He didn't get back up. The others froze. The fight was over before it even began. You should have stayed away, Tyson said calmly, looking at the group. But you didn't, and now you're all paying for it. The tension in the air was thick. The bikers looked at each other, unsure of how to proceed. Jax's face was red with frustration, but he knew they couldn't win. They had picked the wrong fight. One of the other bikers, a heavy-set man with a thick beard, stepped back. Forget it, he grumbled. Let's get out of here. The rest of the group followed suit, backing away slowly, their eyes still on Tyson. It was clear that they were beaten. As they turned to leave. Next time, think twice before messing with someone you don't understand. The bikers didn't say a word. They just left, disappearing into the night. Tyson stood there for a moment, his expression calm as ever. He had handled the situation without even breaking a sweat. When the last biker had disappeared, Tyson finally turned and walked back toward the diner. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he wasn't afraid to deal with it when it found him. Inside, the waitress looked up from behind the counter. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice a bit shaky. Tyson gave her a small smile. It's fine. Just another day. As the bikers disappeared into the night, Tyson stood there for a moment, his mind racing. He had just narrowly avoided a dangerous situation, but something about it still felt off. He couldn't shake the feeling that they would come back, and next time, they wouldn't be so easy to handle. Tyson took a deep breath, trying to clear his head. The night was cold and the diner's lights flickered, casting an eerie glow on the empty parking lot. He needed to make sure he was ready for whatever came next. Inside the diner, the waitress watched him from behind the counter, her eyes wide with surprise. It was clear she had never seen anything like that before. That was intense, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Tyson nodded, but didn't speak. He knew better than to say too much after a fight. Words only made things more complicated. Instead, he grabbed a menu from the counter and slid into a booth, his back to the window. The waitress walked over slowly, still watching him with a mix of curiosity and concern. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," Tyson replied, his voice calm. He gave her a reassuring smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. His mind was still focused on the bikers and what might come next. A few minutes later, the door opened, and another group of bikers stepped inside. This group was different, calmer, more relaxed. They barely glanced at Tyson as they made their way to the counter. But Tyson could tell they were sizing him up, quietly judging him. One of them, a tall biker with a thick leather jacket, glanced over at Tyson and raised an eyebrow. "You have a problem with our crew?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Tyson didn't flinch. He looked the man in the eye, his stare unblinking. "No problem. Just don't start one." The biker seemed to sense Tyson's seriousness. He smirked, taking a step back. "Good. We don't want trouble either." But Tyson wasn't so sure. The way the bikers had looked at him, the way they acted, it felt like there was more to this than just a random encounter. He had faced danger before, but something told him that this wasn't over. The bikers ordered their food and sat down. Tyson felt his instincts kicking in. He knew he couldn't let his guard down. The last thing he needed was for the situation to escalate again. The waitress brought over his coffee, her hands shaking slightly. "You sure you're all right?" she asked again. "I'm good," Tyson said, forcing another smile. He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes scanning the room. He needed to be ready for anything. The bikers didn't cause any trouble that night, but Tyson knew it wasn't the end. They would be back, and next time, it would be a much bigger fight. But Tyson was ready. He had been through worse, and he wasn't about to let anyone intimidate him. The bikers finished their food and left. Tyson watched them go. He knew they weren't just any group of troublemakers, they were something more. And when the time came, Tyson would be ready to face them head-on. For now, though, he would wait. And when they came back, he'd be ready to finish what they had started. As the situation began to unfold, no one could have predicted what would happen next. The bikers had regrouped, and now they were back. But this time, they were ready for more than just a confrontation. They came in loud and aggressive, with the sound of their roaring engines shaking the very ground beneath Tyson's feet. Tyson stood tall, his muscles tense, eyes locked on the bikers as they entered the diner again. His hand instinctively clenched into a fist. He could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just another random fight. This was something bigger, something he had to face head-on. Behind him, the waitress stood frozen, her eyes wide in fear. She had never seen anything like this before. But there was something in Tyson's demeanor that made her feel like he was the only one who could stop them. The door slammed shut behind the bikers as they approached. One of them, the same tall biker with the leather jacket, stepped forward, a sneer spreading across his face. "Thought you could scare us off, huh?" he growled, his voice dripping with mockery. Tyson didn't flinch. He stood tall and met the biker's eyes with an unshakable calm. "I'm not trying to scare anyone. I'm just making sure no one gets hurt." The biker's expression changed, his eyes narrowing. He had expected a fight, but Tyson's coolness made him hesitate. Suddenly, the waitress, who had been watching everything unfold, found her voice. "Leave him alone," she shouted, surprising everyone in the room. The bikers turned to her, surprised by her sudden burst of confidence. She was just a waitress. What did she think she could do? But it wasn't just the surprise that caught their attention. It was the fire in her eyes, the determination that was clearly visible even from across the room. Tyson's eyes flicked toward her for a moment, impressed by her bravery. She didn't have to speak up, but she did. And in that moment, something shifted. The bikers, who had come in expecting easy intimidation, now had to face a new kind of challenge. Tyson had always been ready for a fight, but this was different. They had underestimated the power of courage, and now it was clear they had made a mistake. "Listen, we don't want trouble," the tall biker said, stepping back slightly. The other bikers seemed uncertain now, glancing at each other. They had expected fear, but they were met with something they couldn't easily dismiss. Tyson took a slow step forward, his eyes never leaving the bikers. "Then leave. And don't come back," he said, his voice steady and commanding. For a moment, there was silence. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then, the bikers turned and left without another word. As the door slammed shut behind them, the waitress exhaled a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. She looked at Tyson, her eyes filled with gratitude. You really showed them. Tyson nodded, a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. It's not always about fighting. Sometimes, it's just about standing your ground. And with that, Tyson knew this wasn't just a random confrontation. This was the moment that proved he could handle anything life threw his way. The waitress smiled back, feeling a sense of relief. For the first time that night, she could breathe easy. The hero of the story wasn't just Tyson, but the unexpected bravery of the waitress, who found her courage when it mattered most. Tyson sat down in the booth, his mind already shifting to what lay ahead. The bikers might have been gone, but he knew they weren't finished. They would be back, and next time, it would be even harder to keep the peace. But he was ready. For now, though, he had earned a moment of calm.